the scenario. And just for some additional context, as I mentioned, I'm an exposure scientist. I am also the host of something called the Exposure Scientist Podcast, or it's a more so an in-depth discussion of weekly topics where we discuss topics that are relevant to both professionals and the public. But I get a lot of reporters reaching out wanting some information on how we can better distill the information that they're seeing. So I'm hoping that I can do this a little more directly with my daily exposure digest video series. So I'm going to hopefully bring this to you every day. Some days there may not be any information available out there. It may be, hey, you know what? There's just not a lot going on in the world, and that's what happens. So some days there are no exposure stories, but I want to at least bring you some relevant information. One area that I focus a lot on are waterborne pathogens. Waterborne pathogens are something that exists within facility water systems and can cause exposure harms to those individuals that may be susceptible to having any health outcomes. So, what's one that has a lot of notoriety in the world today is something called Legionnaire's disease. Just a quick brief history. Legionnaire's disease was identified at a Legionnaire's convention back in 1976 in Philadelphia. That's where the original outbreak occurred. Legionnaire's disease has been increasing steadily on an upward trend over the last 20 or 30 years as it's being tracked. It is a nationally notifiable disease, and there are ways to address Legionella bacteria within facility water systems. One I want to bring to your attention that has got a lot of notoriety recently is an outbreak in New York City in the Upper East Side. I'm just reading off the link that's in the show notes from the New York City Department of Health. It's discussing that 92 people have tested positive for Legionnaire's disease within the city, within the confines of the area that they're looking at. A number of people have been hospitalized, and there have been few deaths associated with it. I believe the intent here is looking at cooling towers for, again, facility water systems. Cooling towers are areas where Legionella bacteria can exist. Bacteria likes to reside within biofilms. And a brief basic description of a biofilm is just a material, a protective material that forms along the inside of pipes or other material where water is contacting. And if you've ever had a pet and you've reached into their water bowl and you've let their water sit a little too long and you've touched in there, it's kind of slimy, and you're like, oh, that's gross. That is a biofilm. That biofilm does exist within many different water systems and water piping and everywhere else. Disinfectants like chlorine are intended to address those bacteria. However, there are times where there's an imbalance in the chlorine or disinfectant, or there's something that happens, there's a change in disinfectant, and there are reasons why it may not fully, I'll say, eradicate the bacteria. And bacteria has to be growing. Just because it is in very low numbers, that's one thing to discuss, but it has to be growing in large amounts. So these cooling towers that they've identified within New York City, they have been identified or tested positive for Legionella bacteria, and that's where the theorized outbreak is occurring. So these are things to keep in mind. There are ways that bacteria can spread from Legionella. That's mainly through aerosols, little water droplets that are spreading throughout the air. And these water droplets, if you think of large cooling towers, and I have some pictures of huge cooling towers in New York City or across many different buildings, they're typically on top of the buildings. They're spraying aerosols all over the place because their primary job is to provide cooling to engineered water systems, engineered systems within the facility, and they dissipate heat in certain ways. Those aerosols that are generated can be sources of exposure for individuals in those areas. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm going to focus a lot on Legionella because I do a lot of Legionella bacteria work in facility water. I'm going to bring you the stories, but I'm going to bring you others as well. For example, again, I'm sticking with the waterborne pathogen story here. There's a recent story from the UCLA Health, from a hospital that actually had a Pseudomonas outbreak. Pseudomonas is another waterborne pathogen that exists within facility water systems. And they were having some patients that were testing positive, and for is actually a unique strain of this Pseudomonas bacteria. So what they did, what we typically do in investigations is we go in there, we do testing. We identify where water systems are, how water is flowing, where biofilms can form, and we do testing of those and send it off to a laboratory and find out, well, what is actually in the water. Are they testing positive? They do what we call culture plates. You think of like a little petri dish you may have seen on TV or used in school. They put those on plates, or they do some more advanced genetic testing techniques. And in this hospital, they identified Pseudomonas was, interestingly, in a sink drain. And they theorized if it's in the sink drain, it likely may be more places. They did not identify it there. But what they theorized was they were putting materials that were I'll say patient associated materials close to sinks. They're turning on water. Water was splashing. Aerosols were being generated, or water droplets. And they were landing on things that were in contact with patients. And that's how some of these bacteria were spreading in this unique scenario. There are ways to evaluate all these kind of different scenarios. And I don't want you to be, fearful of going out into the world, because we all have to live and exist in the world for bacteria. The disinfectant, this is what disinfectant is supposed to do. There are places that are identified as higher risk places, hospitals, for example, where people may be at an at-risk scenario for having a disease outcome from exposure. Something to keep in mind. Other places where large people congregate, you look at potentially hotels or other large convention centers where there's a lot of water and there's a lot of people. I mean, when you have more people and more opportunities for exposure, you may have more problems from, I'll say, people getting sick based on a lot of different scenarios. What the disinfectant is, what they're doing to prevent exposure into facilities, who's there, are there any people who are, I'll say, more at risk or immune compromised. Every scenario is unique and different. It's important to understand that. I don't want you to be fearful of seeing these stories and going out there and go, I can't leave my house. We all have to leave our house. There you may have a at-risk scenario at your house as well. You have an at-risk scenario when you get out of bed in the morning. So this is all about a relative risk understanding. These scenarios are not typical. They're highlighted in the news because they are atypical. They happen more so in isolated scenarios, one-off kind of situations. When they become large ones, like the one in New York City that had, 92 people associated with it. I actually think that number is more now. But when they have a large number of people associated with it, it makes headlines. This is not a typical everyday thing. They are typically more so isolated individual cases of bacterial exposure than this. And a lot of times, and I'll be honest, a lot of times, depending on, again, the scenario, people can be exposed and not have these problems. It all depends on the unique scenario of the individual as well. So I hope with my daily exposure digest, I'm bringing you some information that's going to help you understand these risks, that are going to help you digest some of the news that you're seeing. If you have questions, if you have comments, I want you to reach out. Let me know. If you have a news story, you're like, hey, Alex, I really don't understand this. Can you please help me understand it, or something like that? I'll be happy to address it here. This is what this is intent is to help you, individuals that are out there that are seeing news stories that it may be sensationalized stories, to not be so scared of the stories, to put them in context. Because a lot of times when you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is happening everywhere, when it's not. They're very isolated. As far as outbreaks, there have been I'll say, few outbreaks that actually occur. And let me just give you context for that. For example, for Legionella or Legionnaire's disease outbreaks, a lot of, I'll say, municipalities or states or whom have you, identify an outbreak as 2 or more individuals within typically a 12-month period. So you can have an outbreak of 2 people, or you can have an outbreak of 200 people, but it makes news. It looks bad. So I want you to not feel bad. So if you have questions, comments, please reach out. Send me news stories that you're interested in. I hope that I have brought you some useful information. I hope to help you out in any way that I can. Again, and there are some chemical stories I think I may be addressing tomorrow that I've seen. This is the Daily Exposure Digest. My name is Alex LeBeau, and I hope you've enjoyed this small series as we continue on through life and to understand risk. Thank you so much.